So we're here at the Nike Lab today to talk about women and fashion and sport and the ways that in which all of those things are kind of interacting with each other in new and really exciting ways. I have amazing two panelists with me. I'm very grateful to have both of you, Maria and Pedro, with me. But before we kick things off, I'll let you guys introduce yourselves just to tell our audience a little bit about what you do. So, start with Pedro.
So I'm a fashion designer. I've been working with fashion since 12 years already. I'm 24 years old. I'm very young. And that's my first collection with Nike. It's also the first time at Women's Training collaborate with a fashion designer. So it's a very exciting project, and I'm very honored to be here.
And I'm Maria Sharapova. I am an athlete. Well, actually, I'm a tennis player. I'm not very good at any other sports. I've been playing tennis since I was 4 years old. I've been part of the Nike family since I was a junior, I believe since I was 11 or 12 years old. It's been an incredible journey. Projects like these and days like this make me look back to those younger years, and to be sitting here in front of such an influential crowd in a beautiful city like London with influential people like yourself is an honor. So we're all very happy to be here tonight.
I'm very happy about that. But you've already put me to shame because you've been working out at 5 o'clock this morning, which is incredible. It's so impressive.
Jet lag otherwise.
I really feel like not a very good human sitting next to you. I'm going to start with a big question, but it's one that kind of has to be asked when you're talking about fashion and sport, because I feel like sport and sportswear is so fashionable at the moment. You know, if you look at kind of any fashion magazine, if you look at street style pictures, all the fashion pack, they're wearing trainers, with their high fashion clothes. You've got sort of fashion people running marathons, just in terms of kind of amazing collaborations, obviously like yours, Pedro, but you've got amazing designers, Riccardo Tisci, Mary Katranzu, all these amazing people collaborating with sports brands. Why is sport so in fashion? That's a huge question.
Okay. So basically, I feel that at the moment, if you think about the 90s, the whole connection to the body was very superficial. Sure. People were thinking about how to find results by doing plastic surgery and very quick treatments. That was only superficial. Sure. So I feel that today people are concerned about the whole body and about the inner part too. And I think sports became like a priority for everyone. So I think it's very natural to see people mixing sports to their daily life. Mm-hmm. And I think it's very modern, and I think it's the way things should be. You can have a couture coat, and you can have amazing silk shirt, and you can wear it with sneakers. Why not? Mm. So I think being healthy became part of our society today.
That's interesting. Do you agree with that? You're nodding.
Yeah, I definitely agree, because when I playing tennis when I was even a teenager, it was always thinking, okay, well now I'm going to wear my sports clothes, and I'm going to put on my tennis gear, and I'm going to put on my gym clothes, and then once I get home I'm going to get out of it and I'm going to wear my casual wear. Yeah. And in I would say 5-6 years that you really see that transition between the clothes that kind of take you through your everyday life, in which you can work out and in which you can have. I think our lifestyles are so fast-paced now, especially for women. We have so many more responsibilities, and I think our wardrobe has to be part of that.
Yeah, it's interesting, that kind of time aspect to it as well.
Exactly.
Do you ever find it a bit frustrating though? It's interesting what you're saying about when you're training, when you have a shoe or a piece of apparel that is so sort of central to your performance, and then you see a kind of fashion person just wearing it because it looks cool. Do you ever look at it and you're like, no, that's not meant to be worn for that?
No, I actually appreciate that, because I think that's the great thing about fashion and sport coming together, is that just because you have this piece that's been designed by a tennis team or someone that sits in the tennis office doesn't mean that piece can't be part of another collection. I think it's always very inspiring when you can put a piece like that was strictly thought of maybe for tennis, but you can work it around into your everyday life and make it cool and not feel like you're going out on the tennis court.
Mm. Did you find that when you were working on the collaborative collection, that kind of element of taking things where you really wanted to do something aesthetically, but then merging it with something that had to always come back to performance? Was that quite tricky?
I don't think that's tricky at all. I think that's amazing, actually, because I always, when I think about that, I think about this phrase that is the function defines the form.
Okay.
And I think that's what nature is all about. When you put function to things, it gives like kind of like a aesthetic nature to it, which is functional and is really interesting. So while doing the collection with Nike, that was the most like exciting part, is to see how you need to adapt design to give function to in performance to who's wearing, and that's for me is the most special part.
Were there any things particularly that you learned, whether it's kind of to do with special fabrics or any of the kind of techniques that they use, anything to do with sustainability? Were there things that kind of came up where you felt?
I think through the process, I learned many things, and I also think my vision of fashion actually changed a lot because of that collaboration.
That's interesting.
Because I think that the fashion industry, in a way, is stuck in a point that's not developing new ways of making clothes more comfortable and functional. And I think that should be a priority. So I think through technology and sport, a big change can happen in fashion. So through like, in terms of design, I think it was interesting because I started with the same way I do my own collection, and through the process I started to I needed to do adaptations to make the clothes in terms of cut and construction more comfortable and better for performance. So totally.
It's interesting, we're talking a lot about how sport is very fashionable, but I'm interested, is fashion kind of coming into sport in the same way? And this is a really good question for you. Because obviously, your outfits have become really, really iconic. But do you find, is the sporting world open to fashionable workout clothes, fashionable clothes to be worn when you're playing?
Well, I definitely think so. I think I've been able to express a more individuality on the court because of my sport and it being an individual sport, and obviously having that relationship with Nike where I can work with the designers hand in hand on creating an outfit that I'm gonna, when you walk through that tunnel onto center court, you're playing in front of thousands of people, so you must feel comfortable in your own skin, and of course that's why the process starts so far in advance, that you know that when you're actually, taking your jacket off and you're going out to play your first point, you're so comfortable and you're so confident in your skin and what you're wearing, that it brings out the best in your level.
And have you noticed that as sport and fashion have become even more entwined, as we've been talking about, have you noticed that the sporting community has become more open-minded to athletes wearing slightly less conventional clothes when they're playing or when they're competing?
I think there's a very interesting way, a new way of putting outfits together that are very not quite conditional as you saw maybe years ago, and they're not so traditional, and you see a lot of different patterns coming together. I think you see a lot more expression and individuality, where I feel like maybe a few years back people were really afraid to make that statement, and now you see those pops of colors and you see those details that are really important. But coming back to everything, if you don't have a material that you're comfortable, that is lightweight, that is breathable, it doesn't matter how it looks like. You're only going to wear it once or twice, and then you'll end up, because you're out there sweating and you're working hard. So of course you look good, but you want to feel like there's innovation in the product, which is a huge part of the process.
Absolutely. Are there any favorite moments for either of you where kind of fashion and sport have come together perfectly? Whether it's an outfit that you've worn or something you've seen one of your sort of fellow players or athletes wearing and thought that looks amazing, or just an iconic moment?
I'm thinking about the streets today, and I think that's the perfect moment, and it's a perfect example. People are wearing more and more sneakers. They mixing like sport clothes with like high-end clothes, and I think it's really exciting the moment. I think we've reached the point where really the worlds are kind of like getting integrated.
Yeah, it's interesting when we saw all those trainers on the couture catwalks, that's really a sign of how kind of, they're not as good as Nike trainers.
But
probably the performance isn't up there. But
actually, I think
you don't want to run in those.
But I think couture always copies the daily life, huh?
Yeah,
I think
exactly.
it's not.
They're gonna tweet that.
They look great though. The aesthetic was there.
Yeah, I mean, personally for me, I think like the biggest moment where I realized how big that fashion moment is in the sports industry is walking out onto the center court in New York in Flushing Meadows. I was playing a night match, and we had worked on this night dress that I was going to wear, and it was a really interesting collaboration because we did a one-off where it wasn't going to be sold, and we had a few different designers come out, and and the dress that I ended up wearing was very Audrey Hepburn inspired. And I remember coming out onto the court and taking my jacket off, and there was just like this front row of photographers where just the flashes just kept going on, and I was like, wow, this must be a moment. But it was because the whole process was so special to me. So to see that reception of fashion on center court, really respecting kind of the look and that, the inspiration was really, really fascinating.
And do you find that you do play better when you feel like you look really, really good?
I do. I really do, because as a woman, you want to feel good in what you're wearing, and we look in the mirror so many times, and we contemplate and we layer and we put things together, and when it feels good, it feels pretty damn good.
Yeah, no.
It's such a great feeling inside. I think it's so powerful to be good at what you do and wearing clothes that inspire you to be even better.
Mm. Is it ever tricky, because there's a lot always in the press about kind of how female sport isn't taken as seriously as it should be, it doesn't get the coverage that it deserves, and I guess there's two angles to it, because in some ways it's brilliant that fashion has embraced sport, because you're seeing more female athletes covered in the media, especially in women's magazines. Mm-hmm. But do you ever feel the pressure, especially when you have got to a position like you have, where you really want to be taken seriously and you don't want to do anything that will detract from your skill and your play,
right?
But then also there is that side that you love. How do you find that balance?
I think there's no right balance, and I actually think the best thing to do is not try to find the balance and try to respect people's opinions and views. And I've been playing tennis for so long, and after any single match or any press conference you do or a public appearance, you're always going to be, there's always going to be opinions from left and right. And I think that's what ultimately makes the world go round, is not everyone is always going to have a positive thing to say about you, whether it is about what you're wearing or, what words you chose to speak of. So that's always the way that I've tried to go about it, and not to focus on that, and just be the best that I can be at what I do, and go out and give maximum effort on that particular day. And, and if someone's not happy about it, or if someone has something else to say, then that's just part of the business. You wake up and you go do the same thing and try to be good again.
Is it great to see young girls, though, interacting with sportswear, even if it is just down to what we were talking about, that level of just wearing a trainer because they think it looks cool? I guess it must be really, really great to see that, though, because it is engagement in some way with sportswear. Really exciting for you.
It is. Yeah, I think it's an incredible movement, and I think it influences just that piece of athletic wear influences people to be more active, absolutely.
And I don't think they wear just because it looks cool, but I think also because they want comfort.
Yeah.
For sure.
It's interesting. I want to go back to what you said about how designing this collection kind of affected your design, because that's a really, really interesting thing to say, and it affected your ethos as a fashion designer. Is it made you really, really always think about performance and comfort now? Was that something that perhaps you didn't feel there's enough of a focus on if you're just designing for a high fashion context rather than a sportswear context?
It was not a big focus, and now became. And I also I concern a lot myself about how high-end clothes and about how fashion is manufactured today.
Okay.
Because the sports have so many amazing solutions for seams and working with the materials and reproducing materials. And I question a lot how the two worlds can get even more integrated and more connected.
Sure.
I think I love the concept of taking out occasion and connecting everything, and dressing and doing things because of your desire, not because of the established codes of society. So I think there is a lot of room for sport clothes to have a bigger impact in the market today.
That's really, really interesting. Tell me a little bit. Also, you mentioned you designed the collection in kind of the exact same way that you would put together a sort of one of your much more kind of high fashion collections. What were the challenges of doing this collection?
Actually, I think Women's Training and my brand started to do this collaboration because we realized we had a connection. Women's Training had this kind of interest in exploring new ways of represent luxury in sports and in performance.
Yeah.
So how to get materials to feel like silk and to feel like cotton and have the dry fit qualities and everything. So I think that we haven't had challenges, actually. It was very, very easy. We were in the same page the whole time. It was only the matter of adapting a few design things that I wanted to do to make it more comfortable and practical, which was the best thing that could happen to the product.
Yeah. And tell me, do you feel a little bit when you're producing a collection like this, does it take you back to when you were a fashion student? Because I'm interested, or when you're not fashion student, when you're aspiring to work in fashion, because obviously we have some students with us. Because I feel like if you aspire to work in fashion, you dream of being, you know, a John Galliano or a J.W. Anderson, and you don't perhaps focus on working for a sports company. And it's interesting given your trajectory, because I know you spent time, you know, at Lanvin or Giambattista Valli, and did you have any time where you thought, oh, I want to work for a sports brand? Is it something that we should be encouraging our young creatives to think about, rather than kind of fetishizing high fashion?
I think like everyone should always think when it's getting to the fashion industry that there is so many other possibilities that it's not only about couture, it's not only about prêt-à-porter, you know, there's so many possibilities, and for sure sportswear is amazing.
Yeah.
I sometimes I think I'm questioning myself. If I shouldn't become so much more practical, actually.
Yeah. It's interesting, I just wonder, I think it's perhaps not something that if you go to sort of Central St Martin's or London College of Fashion and you talk to the design students there, very few of them, I presume, would be like, oh no, I really want to work for Nike, or I really want to work for a sports brand. There's such a focus with our young creatives where we try and put them into kind of, as you say, that kind of high fashion hamster wheel. And I wonder if and Nike do some amazing things with students, and do you think that we should be encouraging young creatives to go more towards sportswear?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
Okay, good. Get them all doing it. Tell me, where did your love for fashion come from?
Oh, I'm not really. I think when I moved, I was born in Russia, and at the age of 7, we moved to the United States, and I'd never seen such big stores before. I'd never seen so many clothes in my life. It was amazing. The choices, the fabrics, the colors, everything just on racks and malls that were just shopping centers with so many floors. And, you know, it was, I actually, when I moved, my mom didn't move with me right away. And after a couple of years, she joined my father and I remember going shopping with her, and that's why I think she was kind of my inspiration towards fashion. Was she always went to stores, and she bought the classical pieces. And you know, I was 10 or 11 years old, and I would always ask my mom, well, why there's so many like pinks and patterns and so many cool choices, and you just go for the beige cashmere sweater. I was like, why? And she's like, because you'll learn one day. These are timeless pieces. This will carry you for so many years, and this, you can wear this and with so many different things. And I think little by little, I started appreciating quality and understanding fashion, and actually enjoyed architecture a little bit more than fashion as a youngster. Sure. And I think that kind of design element and creativity, and then my work with Nike, where you know you sit in a room with just incredibly talented people that when you work through materials and you work through designs and functionality and trying to, as you know, tennis attire is you know, you have to have a certain shape and form. You can't work too much with volume, so it's a lot of it is creating unique materials, you know, different colors, coming up with different straps, structures that just, you know, looks differently in the eye, because we change outfits about 10 times a year. So everything, in order to make things look fresh and new, you must really focus on those details. And over the years, that type of experience in those meetings, I think, just has helped me grow and learn so much about the fashion world.
And it's interesting because you've worked directly with Nike, kind of producing garments. Is that something you ever thought that you'd get to do? That must be an amazing thing to come out of your...
I don't think I never did, because it wasn't, I had never actually, you know, when you're growing up playing tennis, your goals are, has nothing to do really with tennis. But I had started wearing Nike at the time when they didn't have a junior line, and I had to roll up my tennis skirts like 10 times, and I had to cut the t-shirts because they were like dresses on me. So coming from that, and then sometimes in meetings I would just pinch myself, because I would, you know, now I have a tennis collection that young, you know, girls are able to wear and play, which just never existed when I was a junior.
Yeah. Why do you think that it didn't exist? What was it that kind of changed that mentality?
I don't think, well, for tennis, I don't think tennis was such a popular sport when I was a junior. It wasn't, I don't think you had actually a lot of iconic Nike athletes that had the opportunity to, I think, you know, now you have Roger, and then you have Rafael Nadal, and just really iconic athletes that have been part of the brand for many years, and so many young, boys look up to them, and you see wearing their hats and their attire, and one day dream to be them, and these athletes have an incredible opportunity to kind of share that inspiration with them.
It's interesting going back to what you were saying, Pedro, about how, this has had such a huge impact on how you design and how it's made you think about high fashion clothing, because I'm interested for both of you, whether it's when you're designing now, when you're sort of looking at high fashion clothes, or when you're wearing high fashion. Do you ever occasionally put on designer clothes and you're like, oh, this doesn't fit as well, or this doesn't feel as comfortable because you're so used to wearing incredible performance wear, and does it almost seem not quite as good now?
A lot of the time.
Really? Just like the fit's a bit off or something?
Unless you're wearing a Laia or Alexander McQueen knit dress.
Yeah, it just doesn't.
Well, I think it's interesting because you wanna experiment. When you experiment with different shapes and fabrics, comfort is not always the priority. And of course, a big portion of my career I live in comfortable clothes and in sports attire. So in a way, it's actually a good change once in a while, because you're able to come out of an evening, and the best part of that evening is when you get to take the shoes and the dress off and go back to your sweats. But in the moment, when you are wearing heels, it's nice to change, because I don't get to do that very often.
Yeah. It's interesting, it's kind of going the other way for women who wear high fashion a lot. It's almost like they want to, as you say, they want to have that thing that they can take off their heels.
We always want what we don't.
Yeah, exactly. Is it quite dangerous, though? This is maybe a good question for you, Pedro. Is it quite dangerous that when we're seeing a sport look kind of replicated on the runways, which we are seeing, kind of going back to that, what we were laughing about with those couture trainers, but this idea of kind of athletic wear, but it's not got the performance elements. And we do see that quite a lot on the runways, which is interesting given what you've produced, because it's obviously looks incredible, but it has this performance side. But if you look at what we're seeing in Milan or Paris or wherever, a lot of it is the look, but without that performance background.
I think it depends. I think that it's all about the balance, also about the idea behind and the philosophy behind the brand, and also the proposal. I think that sports have amazing aesthetic, and as I was saying, this thing of like the function defines the form. I think that in a way, sports make so many tests and exercise and like a huge laboratory of like tests that it really reaches like aesthetical amazing result. So I think it's very natural for fashion to get influence and to research on sports to have a amazing aesthetical result. But for sure, I think it's much more interesting when you can have also the functionality attached to it.
Do we think, this is a controversial question, but do we think that fashion brands are less innovative perhaps than sportswear brands? Even just because they don't have access to this amazing fabric research? Who's really leading the way?
Definitely sports.
Yeah?
Yes.
Controversial from a fashion designer.
No, I think so, and that's what I always say, and that's what I want to push in the fashion industry, is to think the same way sportswear is thinking in terms of innovation. Actually, Nike is thinking, to be more precise, but in terms of innovation and how to work with materials and how to develop the garments, because we still have the same machines that we always had, and as in sportswear, it's bonding, in simming, doing seamless like clothes, so many amazing innovation things. Yeah,
it's interesting that, because I think one of the things, do you think fashion's perhaps not as sustainable as it could be? You talk about that kind of old machinery. I think there's a lot of emphasis on relying on systems or techniques that have been around for a long time, rather than looking at ways to kind of, as you say, innovate.
I think it's interesting. I think we never get rid of old technologies, like we still use the radio, we still have paper, and the world have developed a lot,
I don't know for how long more, but...
But I think we are going to keep always having like old technologies. But the thing is that I think that there is new things that we could add in fashion, and there is a lot of space for new products to be developed and also to redefine the classicals. I'm wearing a suit which has a queen inside, and it seemed like 100 years ago. Why not doing the suit in a neoprene that you can move and you still can have the same structure? Or even like, why don't 3D print the suit?
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of. I think the 3D printing machine is gonna be the big next step in the big next revolution in fashion. I think like the second industrial revolution, because it's gonna change totally the way the clothes are manufactured and also sell and everything. You're gonna be able to download in your house your own garment. It's crazy, like the music revolution.
It's true, yeah. But I think going back to the high fashion meets sport is, if you look at a collection that is sports or athletic inspired, you could take that piece off the runway and give it a test in the gym or on the tennis court, and it's not going anywhere. And I can bet that it's not going to look as pretty as it looks on the runway, because it's not. I personally believe there's no sports innovation in those pieces.
No,
and
absolutely.
that's what you need when you're looking to create collections like these.
Tell me more about what would we like to see. Do you think, what's the reason, I guess that's what I'm asking, that we're seeing so much innovation in sportswear but not so much in high fashion? Is it the pace? Is it because there's collections so often? Do you think that's part of the problem?
I think it's the whole system, the way the industry is structured, and I think also is also related to quantities, you know?
Yeah.
Because I think the whole schedule is totally different. One thing that I must say, I'm much more interested now than to get the manufacturing techniques from sports to create something more kind of like related to fashion and more kind of like, I can't say classical, but more kind of like not looking like sport, but just the manufacturing techniques, than the things that I used to do on 2000, that was giving a sport kind of like look to the clothes, but not having the functionality.
Yeah.
I think the functionality behind the sports is the most interesting thing, and I love when you see is a high-end piece you don't see, but there is a lot of sports qualities behind it.
Yeah.
I find this fascinating, you know.
Yeah, that's very interesting, because I think that's what we're seeing a lot of, isn't it? It's sports surface, so it'll be a trainer, it'll be a dress that looks like a Flyknit, but it's not, as you say, it's not taking the sports innovation and using it in a non-obvious way. It's just kind of trying to create the sporty look. Yeah, that's very interesting. Do you think that fashion people are cautious about innovating, whereas I think sportswear companies kind of have to, because they're working with athletes and players such as yourselves. So, you know, they have to make a shoe that will work better for you. But I guess there's not that same kind of impetus on the fashion industry to sort of push things forward.
I think there are a few designers. I think always in history we had like a few designers thinking about that. It's not everyone, of course, but for sure.
Who's doing a good job? Put you on the spot.
And if you think about one name, and I think I love that Maria have said that, Alaya is an amazing example. What he's doing with knits is totally functional.
Yeah.
He's like pushing new ways of manufacturing the dresses, of like knitting it, taking out the seams. I think he's one example.
I went to the knit not the factory, the knit museum here.
Did you?
Yeah, today. And they had
You've had the craziest day, working out 5 o'clock and then going to the knit factory.
I know, that's what happens when you're jet lagged, I'm telling you. But I ran into it very randomly, but it was a fashion story and an exhibition of the history of knits. And at the end of it all, there was a Nike Flyknit shoe, which was incredible, because you start in the 1800s, when the first time where they were knitting, sweaters in Scotland to this Nike, which was really cool. It was very nice to see.
Yeah, that is really interesting. No, I think it's great with something like the Flyknit. It's an interesting one, because when I was out in New York for the Nike Women's Summit, and they kind of held up the Flyknit and how it's made in such a kind of just in such an amazing way with so little waste. And you think, if you go into a studio of a fashion designer, there's kind of samples everywhere, there's fabric everywhere, and it's interesting. I think it's just totally different mentalities. There's kind of surface versus performance. But I want to get both of your opinion on where the emphasis on comfort came in, because we've all kind of agreed that comfort is really big for women, and that's something that is affecting the way that everyone shops and the way that all high fashion designers are now working. But does that come in from lifestyle changes? Is that because women are more vocal about how busy they are? What's brought that in? Because I don't think that's just a sort of a visual thing.
I think so. It's a little bit of a lifestyle thing, definitely. Yeah. I think our world is so much more fast-paced, and we're trying to get so many more things done that we want to be comfortable in our lives, and whether we are in the gym or whether we are in the office, we want to feel comfortable in what we're wearing. We don't want to think about, the extra seams or, the material not feeling right on the skin. It's just, those are the last things that we want to be thinking about.
It's kind of weird, to send an email crossing the Atlantic in 1 second, and then you're having to worry about the clothes in a way.
Yeah, I know what you mean. You can't walk down the street comfortably.
We had such amazing technological revolution in communication, and I think this revolution should apply to everything now.
Do you think it almost looks a bit outdated to be really dressed up as well? It's interesting how that look has really fallen from favour, this idea of being very kind of polished. It's now quite cool to be a little bit undone, and I wonder if that's kind of had a big effect on people wanting to wear things like trainers. It just looks a little bit cooler.
Definitely, yeah.
I think it's also related to feeling your persona is being well represented.
Okay.
So I think if you feel well dressed up, why not,
Yeah.
I just think I think it's really important to feel good in what you're dressing. For me, comfort is a priority.
Tell me more about how you're going to bring this focus on comfort into. I'm really intrigued by this now. How you're going to bring it into high fashion, because you mentioned a neoprene suit. What other ideas do you have? Don't want to give them away.
No, I have been working the last season, my last spring-summer collection. I have developed a special crepe, which is built like a neoprene but has the surface of a crepe. I did a crazy development in Japan.
Yeah.
I have a lot of the crepe in my stock now because the quantity is,
Absolutely huge.
it's huge. But I love this material, so I'm going to use for a while. And it's a crepe that has a neoprene kind of aspect, but it looks like a crepe. But you don't need to structure the material underneath to give the shape you want, You just you can work only with the crepe.
That's interesting.
I think there's a lot of things to be done.
Yeah.
And I think what I've realized when I had the first time I seen the whole collection in Nike ready is that I should be thinking more about redefining the classicals.
Yeah.
The pocket of a suit is made for a wallet 100 years ago.
Yeah.
How that we're gonna, integrate the suit with the telephones we use and be able to wear in many occasions during the day and still have it clean.
Do you think we've all been a bit lazy? We've just accepted things as they are?
Totally.
Yeah, that's interesting. And it's interesting that all came from working. Was that just because there's this obsessive focus on performance? Is that kind of where that idea came from? Because it's interesting that you was it all came out of working with Nike, had such a kind of all these new ideas. Did you just think about your own clothes in a different way?
Totally. My own clothes, I always think the way I dress myself. And the new things I want for myself in terms of clothes is not related only to design, but totally related to manufacturing. I think that's the next big change in fashion. But my big doubt today is if this change is going to happen before the 3D printing or it's going to happen with the 3D printing.
Yeah.
If the whole industry is going to change for 5 years, in 5 years and new manufacturing techniques going to be applied to fashion, or if the 3D revolution is going to come so fast that the high end and haute couture, the prêt-à-porter is going to become kind of an haute couture, and things that are handmade with the machine is going to become a big luxury,
Sure.
and downloading pieces on your house is going to become the next big thing.
But it's exciting because it seems like you both really agree within your respective sort of roles and industries that it's such a time of change, which is interesting, isn't it? Because I think maybe that's kind of what's sparking all this discussion about, as we said, women in fashion and sport, because there's so much change going on. There's so much change in sport. There's so much change in fashion. Is it an exciting time or is it a bit scary?
I think innovation and technology is an incredible thing, and I think it will bring us to so many different opportunities and levels. And I think we all have ways to go back to timeless and classical style. That's I always feel that is a personal choice, but to see people innovate and to create and to get together and bounce ideas off of each other, I think that's so cool. And that's, if we're sitting here 5 years from now, I'm sure there will be some really amazing things that we'll say, wow, it has changed so much in the last 5 years.
How about you? Excited or are you scared?
I'm actually, I was talking last week to my mother. She's really fascinated about the future, and I think all the science fiction, sports reference in my work have all come from my mother, which is also a fashion designer. And when I was like 6, she was saying like, you need to watch 2001: A Space Odyssey. Like you need to go to Nike to research and all that. And I think we were talking about how much is changing, but how much still have possibilities to be done.
Yeah.
And how much we still in the beginning, because if you think about the last century, if you think the beginning of the last century, we didn't have even the car on the first decade. So imagine the things that are coming. I'm reading a book that's the physics of the future.
Yeah.
And it's like, is this amazing writer he's in touch with the 300 more influential scientists today, and he gives a bit like a notion for us of what's going to be the next 100 years with like tests and like things that have been already tested. It's really, really interesting.
It is an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think what's interesting also thinking about the future, and it's interesting to talk to you kind of with your position in fashion, because I feel like often things that look very futuristic, people don't like the style of them. It's interesting what you were saying about some of the 3D printed stuff and how it looks really, really hard. And I think what's interesting is to see how innovation becomes more seamless, so it doesn't look like something was made using a kind of really innovative fabric. It just looks kind of the same. And
also, when innovation is going to have a real impact in people's life. Because printing something that's only for a catwalk is one thing, but having this like being worn by everyone is another thing. You know, like when Chanel made a revolution, when Saint Laurent made a revolution with the suit, you would see people wearing in the street.
Yeah.
So I think we didn't get a point where like technology in fashion is strong enough to make the difference on the streets.
Yeah, was that another of the kind of the appeals of collaborating with a brand like Nike, because sportswear brands, they just have such a mass appeal compared to a fashion brand. That must have been really exciting.
Super exciting, yeah, totally. And it's a functional product which many people can buy and wear, and it's still very strong in design. So it's like really, really exciting.
Should we open the floor up to some questions?
Well, in an action, in a sport, if you're in a sport where you're moving so much and you know you're sliding around, not that I'm sliding around the court, but I don't have that physical capability, but many players do. The amount of force and traction that goes into a pair of sneakers is mind-blowing. I mean I see a lot of, especially male players, the way that they move around the court. I think that sustainability will be incredibly difficult to achieve just because of that. It's the action, the movement, the way that the explosiveness and the way that they stop and change direction. But again, that is in tennis. But if you look at soccer and you look at every other sport like that, of course, if you're running straight, then you have, you know, a life expectancy of a really long time, much longer than something in tennis. But that again goes back to technology and the rubber that is used, but I don't see it improving so much actually, especially in a very quick, rough sport.
I think it depends how you see sustainability as well, doesn't it? Because it's interesting, if you see sustainability as making things last a long time, then as you say, you know, when you wear out a trainer very quickly, probably not. But then when you see sustainability about, you know, kind of recycling stuff, I think that's where it gets quite interesting, is how you can have a sneaker and how you can reuse that to become something else, almost like acknowledge that you're going to get rid of it after kind of like a couple of matches or whatever, but then what can be done with it? That's what I find really interesting, which I do think sports brands are looking at in a perhaps more interesting way than fashion brands. I don't think fashion brands are like, oh, when you're bored of your whatever, like reuse it. That doesn't seem to have become a bit of an ethos. I know, it's an interesting one. That's a really good question. I'm like pondering that now. That's an interesting question. Yeah.
I mean, I personally think that you are paying for years and years of experience and innovation. And I think that's one of the, when we spoke about, you know, high fashion coming into sport, and that's why I said I don't think it will really work if I take something off the runway and bring it to the court, because it takes years of testing, it takes years of putting together. It is not, you know, to this day, you know, I receive samples of tennis shoes that have been worked on for an extremely long time, and you test them out and they just simply don't work, whether they're not stable enough, whether, you know, it's something that is just not sustainable in a sport type environment. And I think that what you're paying for at the end of the day with Nike is quality. And I've always, you know, when you're looking to invest in a piece, and that's why it's so great to be able to mix high and low, but when you are buying the pieces that are expensive, you're not only looking to buy personally trends, but you're looking to buy a classic piece that you will have for a really long time, and that's what I believe Nike is.
Totally.
It must have been interesting actually working the collaborative collection for that very reason, because obviously working with Nike, the price point is going to be lower than your own, but it is still a sizable price point, so there's that interest of kind of doing something that is more accessible in some ways, but it's still a kind of a high price point. But I guess it goes back to what Maria was saying, whether the performance kind of justifies the price point.
I think there is, then I think we go back to sustainability, and I think when you have a better quality product that is more sustainable and that's gonna last for more time, I think it's more like a better investment than to buy many clothes that's not gonna be good in terms of using it, and you're gonna throw in the trash like after the 3 times you use it. So that's why, for me, I'm very sensitive with the idea of collaborating. I have already, in Brazil, have been invited to do collaboration with fast fashion companies.
Yeah.
And I think a lot about what's the workforce quality, work conditions behind it.
Sure.
And also I think about, in a way, like how much this product's going to last. And I couldn't do anything yet. And with sports, totally different, because for me, it really the product I'm doing has a function, and I know that's gonna last.
So it's kind of worth paying for in that way. It's interesting, isn't it?
My closet, my wardrobe is really small. You know, I don't buy many things, but I buy things really that I'm 100% sure, and that really makes sense for me. That I know it's gonna have a long life.
Yeah, I always think that it's going to have a long life, but some pieces don't end up having a long life.
Yeah.
But maybe that's just women, I don't know.
Depends how you wear them, doesn't it? Yeah.
Well, we pretty much, as Pedro knows, we work very far in advance. I think, you know, we're currently looking at spring of 2016 already.
Wow.
So that is quite ahead in schedule. But when you are working with a product that because it's, you know, I'm sweating, I'm moving, a lot of the time I will need to wear test the dresses myself before we go along with the product. And I'd say we meet about 4 or 5 times a year, and we sit down with the materials. I wear test the materials. Sometimes we make a dress out of a material that is not the exact shape and has nothing to do with the dress, but I wear test it myself because I put it through what I would work in order. So if it's anything less, and if somebody sweats less than I do, then, you know, no one has a problem. We've had experiences where, you know, the material has been wear tested, and I didn't wear test it, and I end up wearing it, and it just didn't have that right feel when I was sweating in really hot conditions. So that test is really, really important. But and those meetings are too. But we go through a meeting where we look at, you know, inspirations and colors, and our main goal is the 4 Grand Slams, and kind of what we're inspired by, whether it's a city, whether it's a moment. One year, for my French Open dress, we put a little Tiffany pearl in the back of the dress as a little detail in collaboration. So we always think of those, and we always play with the color backgrounds of the court. So at the French Open, it's red, and we always think of colors that pop on the red clay. So yeah, that's kind of how it goes.
Sounds really fun. I really want to do that. I'm so jealous. It's such a different time frame as well to fashion. Everything is like, you know, you're working kind of for something that's going to be shown in like a month's time, and to have that luxury of time, I'm very jealous.
Actually, sports was always a big reference on my work, and since I'm very young, my mother was always showing sports as the best solution for aesthetics. So I think it's more than my country. I think it's my mother, maybe. I actually work out and
Like, I work out.
every day.
You're like, this body works out.
Can't you tell?
Every day.
Quite rude.
And I think maybe that was the reason why I found such a connection with women's training, because I know exactly, I go to many gyms all over the world, and I know exactly what women want, and I kind of like feel what they want. And I think like the performance side was amazing for myself to give all like the responsibility for Nike. And you know, it's like it's a savoir-faire, you need to understand that. And I was very open to adapt my design to don't compromise the functionality. I think it's actually related to the way the clothes are manufactured, and I think it's about like kind of connecting the two worlds and not thinking more about the occasion. That's my dream, actually. I don't know if that's what's gonna happen, but you know, to think more about about feeling comfortable, about feeling a certain way, than just like considering the code. You know, I think like sports can bring to fashion a different dimension. And I think the two worlds can be integrated. When I was designing the collection for Nike, I was not thinking that I was doing just a performance collection. I was thinking about a collection which would have all the performance quality, but you could take and you could wear in your daily life. Like the crocodile jacket here.
Yeah. I look great.
You can integrate your wardrobe. But I think there's lots of space to happen also in the fashion world, you know, not only in the sports world. In a way, I think sports or sport clothes are much more luxurious than high-end clothes. When you think about function as a priority, for me, that's a big luxury. Like what I can say is that when we started the collection with Nike, we wanted to do something very bold, and we didn't want it to follow a trend. We wanted to do special pieces that you could wear and you could integrate your daily life. So we were very objective with the color selection. We focused only in black and nude. And we wanted to push more this kind of like of look of the material to feel and look like natural materials. So like in the pants you have like the side band that it looks like a satin. In the shorts the same thing. When we did the neoprene, we were like looking for haute couture, like kind of like pieces to get inspiration from. So like the jacket I did, the crocodile jacket, it was like inspired by a jacket I bought on the marché aux puces, like the flea market in Paris. That was a crocodile jacket. So I wanted to bring back in a way that could be functional, you could wear in the gym and also in your life. So Nike had to go and to do a whole research in how embossing the neoprene to give this kind of leopard look, this crocodile look effect, and also how to emboss but keeping the material dry cleaning material. So I think like with this collaboration we had to find out how to bring like the couture aspect to the performance clothes without compromising both of it, which I think is really interesting. And also when you have a collection that's only 11, or is like just a tiny quantity of pieces, you need to represent your vision and the concept very clear in every piece you do.
Well, I'm afraid that's all we've got time for, but that's fascinating discussion. It's kind of given me loads of stuff to think about. So thank you so much, Maria Sharapova and Pedro Lourenço. Thank you. Give them a clap.